where we're almost there, the halfway point of the 2025 Virginia legislative session. Priorities are still up in the air, and debates are still happening. Committee meetings are still going on. And today at noon, we'll have the House and Senate budget release. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric LaVille, and you're listening to our 2025 Virginia General Assembly update and hot topics of legislation impacting our country. We'd like to thank you again for joining us for this 2025 General Assembly legislative session. We hope that all of you are doing well as you join us every Sunday as we broadcast from the campus of the Norfolk State University, home of the Spartan Nation, from none other than WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA. Well, we went through some record temperature drops, especially in the South, and record snowfall. Back home, we got over 10 inches of snow in New Orleans and also in Florida, Alabama, across the South, and even got snow here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, in Virginia Beach, and all through here, the east side of Virginia. But it's starting to warm up, and we have beautiful days ahead of us, so we hope that you're still staying safe, staying warm, and staying healthy no matter what you do. Today, we're going to discuss hot topics, legislative updates impacting from the General Assembly, and also legislation and things coming from the White House as it relates to Virginia and the rest of the country. I'm not sure if you've been watching, but there have been a lot happening across our country and here in the Commonwealth impacting our everyday lives. So here, what we like to do, we like to bring it to you. What's happening, what's going on, to make sure that you are being informed. Now, joining me to discuss this issue of legislation coming from D.C. impacting you is none other than my good friend, award-winning author and journalist, Dr. Will LeViz. He's going to join us in just a few moments. But I want to talk to you about the General Assembly. Now, we know that the General Assembly got off to a little rocky start with the water crisis in Richmond in the mayor's first week of office. But luckily, because of our systems and how government works and industry works with government, water was brought back to the capital city and all was well. But at the same time, it did reveal some cracks in the system. And sometimes you need a jolt in order to reveal what cracks you have. And we're thankful that we had really no major losses, especially loss of life, but we were able to get things back going. And we've been in full swing up there in Richmond, going back and forth. There's been committee meetings upon committee meetings, legislation upon legislation, going through the debate and the way that government works. This Sunday, however, we're at another very important point in the General Assembly session. Now, it's what's called Budget Sunday. Budget Sunday is when the House Appropriations and Senate Finance and Appropriations Committees complete their action on budget bills. Now, this is happening this Sunday, February 2nd, in Richmond. Now, of course, I'll be leaving here and going there, listening live as they broadcast, as they talk about and discuss what are the priorities and what is being funded from the House side and the Senate side. And from there, we'll talk and we'll discuss and go back and forth and try to get it together. But then on February 4th is what we have crossover. Crossover is the last day for each house to act on its own legislation, except budget bills and amendments to budget bills. And then on the 5th, everything crosses over. So the bills that happened in the Senate side go to the House, and what was debated on the House side goes to the Senate. And then they try to work it out from there. And then we go to what's called the last day of session, called Sine Die, February 22nd. So between all of that, we're acting on budget bills, revenue bills for the House and other appointee conferees, and action bills remaining on last actions. And the governor, he has his day to act as well. And that's on March 24th, the governor's action on legislation, the last day. And then April 2nd is what we call reconvene session. That is where the final signatures for the legislative session and the budget takes place, and legislation becomes effective on July 1st of this year. Now, here in Norfolk State, we have a very robust agenda, as we always do, for the legislative session. And our students, our faculty administration are going up this week and having our NSU Day on the Hill. It's a great day. We'll definitely have next week. We'll discuss that, individuals that attended, to give you an idea of what we're doing here in Spartan Nation to make sure that your legislative agenda is heard to improve not just life here on campus, but also the value, the education, because the Spartan education is true value. So we're lucky to have a great support across the board in the legislature, and we're excited for our Day on the Hill this Tuesday, just as we are for Budget Sunday today. Now, just want to remind you that what's at stake right now, what's at stake on the Hill is election 2025, which after the session, it begins. That is when the entire House of Delegates, all 100 seats in the House of Delegates, are up for re-election, and we elect our new governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. Our new governor will be a woman for the first time in the history of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And it'll be record-breaking. It'll be a white female or a black female, but it will be a woman that will be leading our Commonwealth. So this election is going to get started as soon as session is over, so we're excited to see it. But all 100 seats of delegates are open, and the executive house as well. We still got all the tax cuts that were proposed by the governor. We still have the constitutional amendments. Democrats that filed 3 of those, legalizing abortion, allowing for automatic restoration of voting rights, and then protecting marriage equality. We have education that's still on the ballot, where the governor proposed $50 million for school voucher programs and more money for charter schools. And then energy and data centers, AI law enforcement tech, and the Mominous bill. It's because it's a single bill that affects many different topics, including reducing the child care wait list and creating a commission on women's health policy programs monitoring health conditions affecting maternal mortality. And so it's a lot that's at stake, but we're here to report on it all, to discuss it all, because it means a lot to you. It means a lot to us here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we're going to make sure that you are informed. So continue to join us every Sunday as we bring to you what's happening, what's moving, what's shaking there in Richmond for you. Now, it's not just Richmond and the things that are happening there that are impacting us here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, but it is also what's impacting us that comes out of Washington. Just this past week, the White House pulled back an order on Wednesday that froze trillions of dollars in federal grants and loans and sparked mass confusion across the country. Now, a federal judge had temporarily blocked it on Tuesday before the Trump administration actually pulled it back on Wednesday. But what ended up happening is that there were hospitals, there were schools, nonprofits, other organizations scrambling to understand if they had lost their financial support from the government. As a matter of fact, according to the order sent out from the Office of Management and Budget, it stated in part that they were actually stopping all federal funding and federal assistance to all agencies to give the White House an opportunity to determine if these dollars are being spent on woke ideology, DEI, and what they believe are other policies that do not move America in the direction that they believe it should go. I can tell you that there were many institutions, including ours, everyone across the country, including governors, that were calling and meeting with their staff, calling the White House, calling their legislators to find out what was happening. Because once you freeze millions of dollars of federal assistance, except for Medicaid and Medicare, as it listed there in the OMB order, but once you freeze funding, that means that there are no dollars that can be spent to support these services. Confusion, definitely. Disgust, definitely. But anger, definitely. But no one was happy about this. And what it did, it handcuffed all of our agencies across the country. But because of that confusion, it was rescinded. even though the Trump administration blamed the media for the confusion. Again, joining us to discuss the impact of this and the reckless directives coming from our White House as relates to our agencies and our lives across the country, my good friend Will Levis. Will, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm always doing well, man, when I have opportunity to talk to you. Now, I told you when we talked about this topic, I told you I got my popcorn. Tell everybody, get your popcorn.
Oh, man, look. Popcorn and listen, popcorn and everything else, brother. Lazy boy, the whole nine. But listen, not just popcorn, but some people needed like a heating pad. They needed something on their head, an ice pack. Man, this was crazy.
You can say it for those who drink. They need a stiff drink, some bourbon, some rum or something. You can say it. I know it's Sunday, but you can say it, man.
Well, let me tell you, look, when this order came out, everybody, I mean, the first text I got was like 3 a.m. And then at 8:30, calls started rolling in. We were scrambling, trying to find out what this meant. I was trying to do research on it. And, it just caught everybody off guard. Let me get your first impression of when this came down the pipe.
Well, yeah, similarly, because, I serve on the board at Lincoln University of Pennsylvania. And so we got an email informing us of what this stuff all means and what we should pay attention to and so forth as well. So you're right. The emails were flying. The texts were flying. And for me, the first impression was, here we go with the distractions and the chaos, and that ultimately this is what a lot of people voted for. I mean, the man said that this is what he was going to do. So for those who voted for this and then now they're feeling, sour grapes or whatever, what's the term for it? Buyer's remorse. This is what you asked for, and my first reaction is a sense of, just soberness, and I'm gonna be honest, sense of sadness, because there's a lot of people, a lot of the voting population. This is what they apparently really wanted. This kind of confusion. So that was my initial reaction. Like, wow, I can't believe that so many people in the voting public that this is what they want.
But, Will, I hear what you said. This is what they wanted. But really, this is not what they wanted. As a matter of fact, the governors that were calling the White House were also Republican governors, not just Democratic governors. Individuals that were concerned about cutting off funding for their organizations were not just, what they call liberal organizations, but they were conservative organizations. They were hospitals. They were schools. People were worried about whether they would get financial aid to go to school or not, whether grants for roads and services, highways and bridges were going to be funded. So it wasn't just those that voted for it, this is what they wanted. Nobody wanted this.
I don't know. I understand what you're saying, that, we're a large country and a lot of people are being adversely affected who did not vote for this. But what struck me was that the amount of people who went out and actually, with all of the information, with all of what he was saying that he was planning to do, with everything in the Project 2025 document and all of that he said that he was going to do, with the past experience that we had, that President Trump was in office before, and that they still went and voted for this, or people who said, I'm not going to vote, your no vote, your non-vote, essentially voted for this. And so that's what hit me, was like, wow, this is just really sad, because I've mentioned before in your show that growing up in New York, as a New Yorker, we're very familiar with Trump and his thought process and his way of doing things, and a lot of this is exactly what he has been, exactly what he said he was going to do, and so people really need to be focused on. To me, when I mention the distractions, like, you need to be focused on the magicianship of what's going on.
Right.
With all these distractions that's going on, what is the real stuff, in the other hand, that is being done that we really need to be paying attention to? And that's what I'm concerned about, and that's what I'm starting to look at really closely.
Absolutely. So again, just some of the key takeaways from this particular order. The Office of Management and Budget, seen as a critical power center by the president and his conservative allies, with Trump picked for OMB chief, emphasizing the need to to wield more power directly to the president. With this being the case, when you're looking at freezing a lot of the funding, the federal funding, this was done in large part because of ideology that the president actually ran on, more specifically DEI and woke policy. Will, this is according to the AP. Do you is this the way to govern?
Absolutely not. The way to govern is not to create chaos and not to make decisions that you have to rescind. So, for example, just the fact that he had to rescind the decision should signal a lot to the populace that this was not well thought out, not well planned out, that this is really not about good governance. Because if that were the fact, why would you have to rescind it so quickly, right? Why would you? You would have thought it out. You would have gotten all your constituents involved, everybody who would be affected by this. You'd have had clarity, and you would have rolled this thing out in a responsible way if truly the goal is to be more frugal about government spending and be more precise about what we should be doing. But it's not about that. Clearly, I mean, why would you have to rescind it if you thought this out really well and you rolled it out well? You wouldn't have to rescind it.
But at the same time, he blamed the media for the confusion, saying that he was not confused, the White House wasn't confused, the media made everybody confused. Is this what we call vintage Trump?
Absolutely. I said the magicianship. Absolutely. I think that's what really people have to be careful and really kind of analyze and think about what is happening. So, for example, there's like this big, when you start talking about DEI, it's really, to me, when I look at it, there's a couple things going on. You're really saying, I want you to accept my philosophy of having a double standard, right? You're saying DEI is about, like what Martin Luther King said, that we should be judged by the content of our character, not by skin color and so forth and so on, that we should be hiring people who are qualified, right? Look at his candidates for these various offices. Come on, the qualifications of some of these people are like it's beyond. I mean, I'm having trouble putting words together. Like Robert Kennedy Jr. to be head of heading over our health policy, right? So it's not really about that. What it's about is I want you to accept my double standard. I want to be able to put in people in place that I want to put in place, whether they're really qualified or not, and you're not supposed to question that. And anywhere else where somebody else is putting people in place, they should be questioned. They should be qualified. You remember Kamala Harris during the election was called a DEI
hire
candidate, a DEI hire. Whoa, wait a minute. Former senator, former vice president, has been in state office. What was he? The attorney general?
Attorney General of California, yeah.
Really?
U.S. Senator, elected.
How can her qualifications have been questioned? So, but no, it's not, because it's not really about that. And then the undercurrent of all of this, of why affirmative action was put in place, why there was a civil rights movement, why there was an anti-slavery movement going all the way back that further, is that there's a racist undercurrent. That every time when there's a person of color or as a woman that's involved, now it's about, they have to be qualified. And then now where we're in the era that we're in now is that even when they are overqualified, because that's what we were all taught to do, make sure that you're overqualified. Now when they're overqualified, you're being told, you're only getting that position because you're a woman, because you're black, because you. I mean, that's the trick bag that's going on. So it's really about I want to maintain the double standard.
Right, the double standard and control. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Eric Claville, and we're discussing hot topics, legislation in Virginia and Washington impacting your lives. In the very first part of this segment, I provided an update of what's happening on the Hill in Richmond as relates to our General Assembly. After this show, I'm headed to Richmond in order for us to hear the House and the Senate Finance Appropriations release their budgets and to determine what is it that both sides are trying to agree upon to fund programs vital to the Commonwealth of Virginia. And now we're discussing with my good friend, no stranger to this show, award-winning author, journalist, Dr. Will Levis, as we talk about legislation and policy coming from Washington impacting our lives here. We're discussing the memorandum 25-13, signed by acting OMB Director Matthew Vaith, when he rescinded all federal assistance for an opportunity to review any funding going to various programs. As a matter of fact, according to the memo, it said that all federal assistance, including grants, loans, loan guarantees, and insurance, was to be paused for programs that conflict with Trump's executive order, specifically his orders prohibiting DEI programs, rolling back environmental regulations, enacting mass deportations, blocking abortion-related care, and outlawing trans identities, which the memo calls woke gender ideology. Now, Vaith, he condemned in the memo what he referred to as, quote, this is in the memo, by the way, Marxist equity, transgenderism, and the Green New Deal social engineering policies, unquote. Now, the memo instructed all government agencies to perform a, quote, comprehensive analysis of all of their federal financial assistance programs, unquote, to determine whether they will continue receiving federal funds. And those analyses were to be set to be due by February 10th, and which it demanded funding opportunities, which are used to communicate opportunities for government funding, be paused. Now, the memo also specified that going forward, agencies would also be required to submit to oversight from, quote, a senior political appointee, unquote, in order to, quote, ensure federal assistance conforms to administration priorities, unquote, with the exceptions may be granted on a case-by-case basis. Will, absolute confusion. What is going on?
Like I said, a comprehensive analysis by February 10th. What comprehensive analysis would you be able to do in that short a time? We could barely do a comprehensive analysis of our own budget, home budget in that amount of time. Why wouldn't you just if you're going to do a comprehensive analysis, why not start that comprehensive analysis now? And then if your comprehensive analysis determines that there's funding that's being mismanaged and so forth, then you roll out a plan to change that, if you have the authority to do it, because so much of this is that it's the Congress that appropriates funding and all of that on this as well. So that's what I mean. This is just all magicianship. This is all three-card money, and people need to be turning and looking clearly at, okay, what also is going on behind the curtain that is really going to be impactful. Another thing that I think that is happening that's going to play, because President Trump has already been very clear about his personality, his feelings about President Obama, feelings about President Biden. DEI began under President Obama. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what this is eliminating anything about his legacy, anything, whether you agree or not, eliminating that, eliminating anything about Biden, whether you agree or not. Because Biden beat Trump. That's what this is about too.
You mean the guy he was talking to the next to her and to the funeral for former President Jimmy Carter?
Yeah. Oh, but please don't get me. You got to do a whole nother show on that. You got to do a whole nother show, because I'm sitting there and I'm watching. Oh boy, you're real chummy. You're laughing it up, And this guy has all intention. He has not forgotten that White House dinner when President Obama roasted him and all of that, because that started a lot of his anger and a lot of his angst. I believe it just fueled it. He's not forgotten that.
Look.
He's trying to eliminate your legacy, but you sit there being chummy.
Hey, Will, it was literally rocket fuel on a fire. Let's put it that way.
Oh my God! Oh my goodness!
But look, check this out. So I want our audience to understand how reckless this was, and I'm saying reckless not because it's an opinion, but because of how government works in the process. You know,
right.
I've been doing this for over 2.5 decades, and I'm still learning, forever learning. But listen to how the governor of Illinois was viewed this. He said, during a press conference on January 28th, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker stated there had been, listen to this, there had been, quote, no communication, unquote, with state governments regarding the funding freeze, and in fact, we literally were informed that federal agencies are not to speak with us, unquote.
Wow.
How
Will, how do you govern that way? How do you govern, a union of 50 states in that way, and your intention is for what's in the best interest of the people of the I don't understand how people can see that and accept that as being in our best interest.
Well, let me go a little bit step further. Governor Pritzker said, you think it was an accident that the memo came out last night, meaning the night before it came out, which was Monday night.
Right.
Like I said, my first text was at 3 a.m. Tuesday morning. He said, and today our state agencies couldn't access those systems. He said, it's not. The intention is to disrupt. Let's go a step further. It also seemed, according to report, that the freeze would have affected federal school lunch programs, potentially blocking low-income children from obtaining food during the freeze. According to the GOP Representative Rich McCormick, defended that likelihood on CNN and bizarrely appeared to advocate for child labor in the process, arguing that children in poverty should be going to work at Burger King or at McDonald's instead of staying at home and getting their free lunch during summer vacation. Absolute ignorance, right?
It's mind-blowing. And again, like I said earlier, a lot of the voting population voted for this against their own interests. A lot of poor whites who depend on that the food programs voted for this. A lot of low-income Latinos and Hispanics.
Listen,
all over the country.
Elderly depend on this.
Voted for this. And he said this is the kind of stuff I'm going to do. And they voted for it. Yeah. So what is that about?
Now, Will, there is some talk of an internal memo that this was actually purposeful because they want to challenge what's called the 1974 Impoundment Control Act. It's a law that restricts the ability of the president to defer or deny spending funds authorized by Congress. Now, this was passed after President Nixon refused to spend funds appropriated for pollution cleanup and mental health centers.
Right.
So with this, the Government Accountability Office determined that Trump violated it in 2019 when it withheld funds from Ukraine as part of a blackmail scheme targeting his 2020 election opponent, Joe Biden. So they believe, the OMB director believes that this is unconstitutional. So there could be a type of strategy to challenge this in court very soon, the constitutionality of it. And if it goes to the Supreme Court, guess what? He's got some friends up there that may side with him. So keep in mind, Will, this is a long journey. Like you said, get your popcorn. But if you don't mind, I want to have you back to talk about this because it's not over, right?
No, it won't be over, and I'll just be buying some new bags of popcorn, man. Plenty of fundraisers going on. Again, I just encourage folks, pay attention to what is really going on, connect the dots, and get your money, your mind, and your spirit right.
Absolutely. This has been Stay in the Water. I'm your host, Eric Claville. Thank you for joining us as you always do. Until next time, be good, be great, God bless, and we'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Carrie Washington, and you're listening to State of the Water with award-winning host Dr. Eric Claville.